Welcome to the latest dev blog video for the Doors of Trithus. Today I'm not going to be showing off gameplay. Today I want to do a bit of a deep dive into the faction system, which is an upcoming set of features we'll be adding to the game. It was mentioned a bit in our last video if you've seen it. We did sort of an overview, and today I want to take you through some of my thinking and a bit of the progress and show some of the visuals for how this is going to work. But what is the faction system? Okay. So in the Doors of Trithus, right now there's an overworld map. This is how you move around. Right now, just an island. And this is a tile-based map. Pretty obvious. So like this is a tile, this is a tile. Every location's on one tile. And the faction system is going to be layered on top of this, where you can imagine different groups taking land and claiming these tiles. Almost claiming territory, and also fighting with each other. And this will be continually dynamically updating as you play the game. You can imagine a bandit faction takes hold of a forest. It grows in influence, maybe it gets so large that it becomes dangerous for the player to move through that area. Or maybe the player does some quests for a nearby town, and that town's influence increases, reducing the bandits. And there'll be lots of ways to interact with these factions in the game. You can try to ignore them, or you can try to to wipe them out if you want. And this is the goal here, is just an interesting layering on top of this mechanic, and it's supposed to make the world feel alive and to provide some kind of context and things that events can be based around while the player is moving. There's a lot more I could say. I don't want to get into too much detail. I want to sort of just talk through it a little and show some graphics and show some of my process and some of my thinking. I'd like to talk a little bit about the inspiration behind this feature. What we're looking at right now is the dungeon generation algorithm, or one of the dungeon generation algorithms. It's placing rooms. And this is an image we've shown off a few times. Kind of pretty looking. And the idea behind this was, the goal was really to create something organic feeling, something organic looking. Where when I was working on it, I was heavily thinking about coral reefs, where the way that it's that perfect balance in nature, it seems, where it's chaotic but it's still patterned. There isn't just one plant typically that takes over everything. There isn't just like one huge room. You want variation, but you want variation within a context that provides interest, and that, I think, makes for good content in a video game, where the player is never sure what to expect, but he's not going to see nonsense. He's going to see certain patterns, something within a range. So there's something to be expected, but there's also, that element of nature, the patterns of nature. Slime mold is another thought, another big inspiration. If you've watched videos on slime mold, it's pretty amazing how it can search out for food to get the nutrients. It sends out these spindly needles, and when it finds food, it starts to soak it up. But it's also solving an incredibly complex problem as it does this, where there's one article that talks about how slime mold solves the traveling salesman problem. They used it to find the optimal subway routes in a city, where they just place food where the population centers were, and the slime mold would grow in the same way that an optimal subway system would, which is so cool. And it's got a reason it's there. It's not purely random, but it's also unpredictable. And there's something I find fascinating about that. And when it comes to how these factions are going to influence the world, I would love that same sort of feeling where they're pushing out, they're growing, they're interacting with other factions, but it isn't just this one just takes over. It's this constantly changing, dynamic, slightly unpredictable system. That's the goal. Let's see if we can get there. One of the things that's really important in game development is prototyping. You don't want to spend all that time programming it for real in the game without being sure that it's going to work. So for this faction system, I've set up this separate app here, this grid system. We can play with some ideas. And the first question to answer is, how do the factions get started? How do they get placed? And I think this is too tough of a problem. What we can do is seeding, just how in nature you can imagine seeds spreading over a piece of land. We can seed our map. And here you can see an example of this, where each color would represent the influence of a different faction. And how it works is each turn, there's a small chance that an unclaimed tile could be claimed by a faction if no surrounding tiles are claimed. And even here, I think this is a good starting point. Because despite it being totally random, you can almost see territory starting to be claimed. Like, it looks like there's faction, like they're marking their area. It's not just individual blocks. And the other great benefit of this is this seeding system can keep running. Even when all land is claimed, that's fine. It won't seed anymore. No more factions can emerge. But if they got wiped out for some reason, this system would be running, and it would keep the world from feeling alive. If something wiped out a faction, enough time passes, something else grows. The next question is, how do factions claim new tiles? One easy approach to this is the influence from one tile spreads to nearby tiles. So let's run that and see what happens. You can see here the seeds start claiming the land around them, and then that spreads, and eventually they hit the territories of other factions, and it sort of stabilizes. Now, this is pretty cool that this pattern emerged from this simple system. Random seeds, and then this influence tiles around them. The problem with this is it's too stable. We want it to continually move, almost like waves. And there's different ways to do this. One is eventually these factions will spawn armies, and those armies can start to take land. But even without the armies, I think there should be some back and forth. Well, I'm back after a little while. What I realized was missing was decay. In nature, plants will decay, and that leaves room for new plants. So here what I've done is I start with a bunch of cities. Those are highlighted yellow. Then influence spreads from those locations, and those locations can increase or decrease influence. And it's possible, if enough time passes, that some of them, if they go so low, they'll decay completely and die. And you can see one there just died. And this is giving what we were looking for, which is a dynamic map that continues to change and update, and also the sense of controlled territory. You could imagine, like, the idea obviously is these are different factions, and they would be fighting, and they're reclaiming territory, losing territory, building new fortresses, and these are fortresses the player could attack as well, and in that way they would impact the influence. I'm pretty happy with it. Let's take a look at what it looks like faster. And here it is, the speed much turned a lot up. Almost looks like a lava lamp. Definitely has that flowing, I think, organic sort of feel. It looks like green's doing really well. I'm pretty sure this cannot reach an end state where one faction takes over the whole map, because there's always a chance that any of their cities can decay. Again, these yellow ones are cities or fortresses, structures that they build, and they're giving off influence, which is represented by the number. Pretty fun to look at. Next up would be applying this, something very similar to this now, to the game world, where these are actual structures appearing, and then this is all tracked on the map and saved with the map, and from there we can start having these areas influence the player in other gameplay aspects. Okay, this number approach is kind of madness. I think I want the colors back, but it's start. Don't know if I made this clear since I'm recording these clips pretty far apart in time. This is not, you're not going to see this in game. These colors are and numbers are debug info, just to show how it's going to work and interact. Not sure how I'm going to show borders. We might be able to do something like color, maybe. But to show progress, if I hold space we can see faction influence in game. So over here is Morald's Tower. That faction is red right now, fighting off these bandits, which their faction is the orange color. The town's exerting influence as well, about 4-ish max. And if I hold space and pass turns, you could see some movement going on here, where Morald and the bandits have some back and forth, but it is pretty stable. And the main reason for that is these dungeons are the more permanent dungeons, and until they're destroyed, they're going to exert a pretty stable influence with some fluctuation. To really see this start to change, we'll need the dungeons being added and removed. Let's now take a look what happens with new locations being dynamically added. These numbers are now showing the influence amount, so 100, I think that should be 1. But basically max on location, so this town is max influence here, and then decreasing amount as we go outwards. And right here you can see this was a vacant lot, and then the bandits built a fort there. Let's speed this up, see how it looks. So with the addition of the dynamic locations, we got some more back and forth. In this example versus the previous, the locations are being destroyed. So that would be something the player is doing, or armies, when they are ready to be added. But we can see how they nicely fill in the space. Almost all land on this whole island now has been claimed. And we have this nice back and forth, which is what we were looking for. Here, this bandit fort vying for power with this gremlin fort. And if the player went to these locations, of course, they'd be able to go in, and there'd be some procedurally generated fort they could interact with. I think this is a good place to stop the video. This faction system should be ready in some state for the next update. That'll be in a little less than 2 weeks. Still some more to add. Still need to get the armies moving around on the map and attacking the locations and taking over land. And yeah, we'll see how far I get it along. Hopefully a bunch more in that update. We'll see. And this has been kind of a different video. Let me know if you like this sort of thing, this deep dive, looking into a feature, kind of following along developer progress as it goes. I can definitely do more of these. There's definitely other large features I'll be working on that'll have some visual elements to display. But thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.